I have lost my partner. There she is.
I'm back. I'm
We're
back.
back. Okay, here we go. It seems that we have been sold on this idea that when you're going to meet the one, you've reached and you've resolved all of your issues.
Once we sign that piece of paper, somehow the word marriage or that signing of that agreement really shifts on our identity.
Namaste, amigos. This is Vanessa and Aisha, two wildly passionate women coming to you from opposite sides of the world, Australia and Mexico. This podcast is for you, about you, all of us, all women from all walks of lives, sharing our stories, our truths, our struggles as we uplift, transform, break boundaries, and grow. Welcome back to our viewers. We are super excited for podcast number 2. And today we talk about the roles of marriage in our society and the role that we took on as two women that got married. Aisha, how are you?
I'm great, Vanessa. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited about today's topic.
Same.
So I think I'm going to just jump right in. I think, marriage is, I'm not sure why, but marriage seems to change things. Once you get married, it kind of just changes everything because it's not that honeymoon stage anymore of when you first, you're starting to meet the other person and it's all butterflies and it's exciting and marriage tends to be more the routine, right? The day to day and all of our programs that constantly kick in. And I find it very interesting because it seems that we have been sold on this idea that when you're going to meet the one, you've reached and you've resolved all of your issues and that you're going to be saved. And maybe it's saved in a way that is an idealization of what happily ever after should be. But it tends to be that I'm noticing it is like a mountain. It's like a really steep mountain. And when you've met the one, you're at the bottom of that mountain and you both have to hold on for dear life because when you start climbing, the pressure, the air, the altitude starts to just kind of come crashing down. And how are you both sustaining each other to be able to see that it has nothing to do with one another, but you have chosen to really walk this path together. And I think that we forget that. We forget that as a couple, we're a couple, and sometimes we tend to unbalance very quickly. And I think that that's maybe what happened in my marriage, at least. I came from having my own business and working hard to all of a sudden quitting my job, moving to an island and becoming a housewife. And so this energy of striving and of going above and beyond was all of a sudden I needed to be home and I was cooking and I was cleaning and my husband wasn't arriving on time. So I was becoming psycho and where was he and why was he not there? And that domination, and I don't want to, it's such a hard word, but I feel like once there is someone that is at home, it gives space for the other one to have like almost a raise
Leverage, yeah.
leverage on the other one, right? And I feel like that's a little bit of what happened with me. And I was expecting my husband to come home and to be home at a certain time and for us to be together. And Like I was expecting a beautiful fairy tale to happen, and it really wasn't that. I don't know.
Yeah.
What about you? What do you think about the role? What role were you playing?
I think what you sort of touched on and what it all comes down to is that what you said, once we sign that piece of paper, somehow the word marriage or that signing, that agreement really shifts on our identity. And so prior to that, we're very individualized. We're like, okay, these are my dreams. This is what I want to do. This is how I want to express myself. And you feel freedom with that. So you're like very much, looking through life through your own personal lens. And I think once we sign that agreement or marriage certificate, we take on this lens of the marriage and you forget the fucking you, right? So it's now this fucking entity of marriage and what marriage implies that we sort of live through. And, the thing is, we have been told and we have been conditioned to believe that marriage is about staying home for a female. It is about not working and raising your children, putting your desires and dreams second to now the marriage. And, through no fault of anyone else. And it is just something that has been passed down. So whether our mum or our relatives or our society has done that, even they were taught that, right? So I'm not here to blame, but I'm like, shit, dude, we literally forget our own self and take on this other identity of marriage. And for a lot of us, especially coming from a cultural background, it's about fucking sacrifice. It's about losing yourself. It's about giving up what you really wanted in life to, create this so-called family, to create this so-called being a good wife, the role of being a good wife and what that looks like. And what I noticed too is that in order to fulfill what I thought was being a good wife, a good marriage, a lot of the times it was giving up who I was. And you only realize that when you come so far along that journey and then you look back and you don't even know who the fuck you are. You're looking back thinking, did I really want all this? Or was I doing it because I thought that's the right thing to do?
Right.
Right. And that's the fucking shift for me. It was like, hold on, I've ended up in a place where I don't remember fucking wanting this, but I thought I had to do the right thing. I thought I had to be the good wife. I thought I had to be the good daughter-in-law. I thought I had to be the great daughter. And I realized that throughout the marriage, unless two people are very, very understanding of each other's individuality, one will always lose themselves in it.
Yeah. Yeah, or feel more insecure than the other. I think another, um, uh, in our cases, I think our cultural Latin background, Indian background has definitely maybe put a bit of a way it should look like
Yeah.
of being a wife.
Yeah.
Um, but I think in a lot of places where, for example, in Europe and in the United States, where both people still need to work, because unless you're not married to someone that's extremely wealthy, you both have to work.
Yep.
And then there's the power struggle of, I know women that have better careers than their husbands, and the men struggle with that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, because they are also trying to fit into that role of what they think marriage is for a man, which is provide. I'm the one that brings in the money, and
Yeah,
those paradigms, those things are breaking down now. Things are changing, and that's why there's so much confusion in
absolutely.
what role do we play? What role do I need to play in this marriage? What role does the man play in this marriage? Things are different, so different.
And unfortunately, I touched that on the first podcast, but we don't communicate these things.
Yeah.
We don't communicate these things going into our marriage. We
Yeah.
don't. And these
Yeah.
are such important conversations. Like if you're instilling something in your kids about marriage, it's you've got to communicate what
Yeah.
your role is going to be, what your finances are going to look like, what is the expectation that you each have
Yeah.
for each other and for yourselves.
Because a lot
These
of the
are
times,
basics.
yep. And because a lot of times, how many times do you know that as soon as two people get married, the change of you need to change. I don't like that you're so blah 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 and you are so this and that. So as soon as the marriage happens, it's like this expectation of like I wanting to change you comes about, right? So for me, I'm a very out there, this, that, everything. But then to fulfill the expectation of my cultural background, I have to be more quiet. I have to be more, not as speak up as much and da da da. And then you fall into that trap as well. And so I think it's very important what you said. You got to have these decisions and these conversations before you take to that next level, because it's setting yourself up to know what is expected. You can't expect, and it's really weird. So many times people get attracted to a person for that exact thing. And then once they get married, they want to change that thing,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
It's crazy. It's like, hold on, you liked me for that. I caught your eye for that. And now you want me not to have that. And it's both ways. It can be for the girl or the guy. And
Yeah,
it's
I think in the Latin culture, there's an expectation of, when we're dating, we're supposed to look like Salma Hayek or like Sofia Vergara, and then all of a sudden we get married and we're supposed to look like Mother Teresa. It's like, well, what happened?
yeah,
And
yeah,
I think it's these are all cultural uh, conditionings that are happening, and especially if you're marrying in different cultures
yeah,
and you're not having these conversations, you are bound, I'm speaking out of experience, to go on very different routes because
yeah.
you haven't spoken about how you've been brought up, what you're expecting, what you're looking for. And I think it's interesting because I knew that I should somewhere have these conversations, and yet I was frightened of what the answers would be.
Because you knew
Because
deep
I
down.
knew, because I knew. And that's when that things aren't like, if you're scared of having these types of conversations, and maybe you shouldn't go into it because you're going
Yeah,
into it for the wrong reasons. And
yeah,
life will put you against that wall, unfortunately.
yeah. And yeah, I look back and, like I said, we both lose identity in it. Two people that sort of don't have, has not had that conversation of like, how are you going to show up in this marriage? Instead, what we do is like we take on the role of what the marriage means to ourselves. So my ex could have a completely different picture of what a marriage should be to me, right? And so he's playing the part of what he considers a marriage should be, and I'm playing my own part in it,
Of course.
right? And it's like, how then do you expect that marriage to be of success, right? and and that's what I look at. And I think, my biggest thing was I sort of got that confused. I got my identity mixed up with the identity of what marriage is, and lived through that rather than, hey, you know what, I want to go into this as my whole self and experience a marriage,
Right,
not be the marriage,
right.
right?
Yeah.
So me whole identity as me on an individual level, completely whole and in love with myself, and no sort of like, with a lot of integrity of like what I love, what I don't like, what my values are, what are my non-negotiables. Knowing that now, I see marriage so differently to what I did. Marriage was an identity to me before. I had thought that was my identity. Now I'm like, no, no, you know, I get to experience that. It's not my identity.
Right.
Very
Right.
different, place to come from.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I think that once you've kind of gone through, a divorce or a separation, hopefully what you get out of it is really understanding that, right? Is that
Yeah.
you can't compromise your values for someone else's, because it will end up exactly the same way as marriage number one. And
Yep.
so you have to be stronger, more honest, more authentic on the
Mm,
second round of saying,
yeah.
hey, this is who I am, this is what I expect, and are you in or are you out? And I
Yeah.
think that's really what I have taken from my separation. It was we should have had these conversations of, values and our roles and um, the finances and what happens once you have kids, and can I stay home? Can I not stay home?
Yeah.
Can we
Basic.
afford to have someone help or not?
Yep.
Daycare or not? Like,
Yep.
all these conversations are so important, and we're having them right in the crisis, right when we haven't slept for a couple months straight,
Yeah.
charged up with a bunch of hormones, lack of sleep.
Mm,
The other one is stress because you're stressed, and that's the worst time to have a conversation as a
mm.
couple.
Yeah. 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 And from my experience, I think I would also take into account what is the extended family's expectation of me, because they, especially if you come from a cultural background, it's like, can you meet those needs? Do you want to meet those needs? Because I found a block in that. I had resistance to that because I was um raised in Australia. And so coming across a different culture to that level, I had a massive resistance because I was like, but it doesn't feel right. So even looking into that and seeing how much influence does the extended family have on your marriage? And are you willing to be flow state with that? Or do you have resistance to that? Because it's very important to pick up on that early on and then decide from that moment, because 10 years down the track, that shit's going to be there.
Yeah.
And then you're 10 years into it anyway, you know? And so those things, like you say, money, family, culture,
Religion.
religion, value system, after having kids, work situation, like, fuck, there's so much. And I
Yeah.
think roles are not as set like they used to be back in our parents' time. Roles have fucking moldable now because life has expanded. So many families have working mothers while raising children, and shit's changing, but we're still trying to apply the same marriage construct to the new way of family, the new way of living now, and it's not
And
working.
it's not
That's
possible.
why it's breaking down.
Yeah.
So I do believe that really the best thing for me, and now I look back, is to really be really to know who I am, really, and really don't compromise that shit. Like, because that's being honest with yourself and the other person. Don't fucking tell them 5 years now, oh, look, I didn't want to do that, but I did it because I wanted to keep the peace, or I wanted to do the marriage. No, because you're actually cheating yourself and that person. I think now I stand in my truth. I know who I am, what my values are, what I want, what I don't want. That's being honest. That's being vulnerable. That's being authentic and saying, hey, this is what I have to offer. Do you want to join me for the ride? Rather than, fuck, I'm just not going to tell right now because I really want the relation. I really just want
Get it.
the marriage, It's like, fuck, like this, trophy. I just want the trophy. Doesn't matter if I'm selling my soul. So I think, roles now, you can't live that way anymore. You really have to, two people have to look at each other and say, uh, you know, this is who I am truly.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
are you
And
willing to accept it?
I believe that, there's already, when you come from the same culture, same environment, same neighborhood, and you get married, there's already going to be some rockiness to it because it's two different people. But now you start putting in, which there's a lot of us that are marrying
Mm,
interracially, interculturally,
yeah.
and now you're bringing in things that are on a whole different league.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because in America, for example, your in-laws, you might see them on Thanksgiving and on Christmas, or you might not see them very much because it's not a very family orientated place. In Mexico, you see
It
your
is.
in-laws 3, 4 times a week,
Yeah, same. Yep, yep.
so it's
Yeah.
like, and they're going to be at your house knocking, not even knocking, they walk
Yeah.
in.
Yeah. They've got the keys, man. Fuck that
So
shit.
you really have to, when you
Yeah,
start bringing in culture, religion, race, there are things that will vary and
yeah.
will be bumpier because of it.
Yeah.
And
And
so
there is
it's,
no right and wrong. There is no right or wrong, guys. It is what works for you. Be honest with that and be honest with the other person. Like, it's about being authentically you. It's not that having in-laws there is wrong or not having in-laws there is wrong. It's like, hey, how do you feel? Where do you sit with that? That's what's right for you. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's why roles, like, don't fall into this whole thing of the end goal is marriage. And so I just live through the identity of being a married woman. That's
yeah,
what fucks you, because you lose your individuality, you lose who the fuck you were. And that's why 10 years later, 20 years later, women are like, who the fuck am I? And they're miserable, right? Because we try to live through the identity of being a married woman and forgot our specialness.
yeah, I think you've said it perfectly.
So
I think
women,
this is it. This is it. Look at the decisions very well before taking that jump. Um, because life will get you no matter what. And if this is one of your lessons, it will happen. Um, Aisha, it's always a pleasure. Can't wait to have you guys on to listen for some more stories. And please feel free to share yours. Aisha, have a wonderful day.
thank you, beautiful, and you have a wonderful night.